Hey y'all, hope you're doing well today. So in today's message, I want us to kick off October with a little Halloween themed subject matter. And so what we're going to be inspired by today is the apple, specifically the temptation of the apple, the golden apple, the poisonous apple. So many different ways that the apple has been used symbolically throughout history to make a point, right? So what is that point? That's the big question. And I feel like, we don't, and it's understandable. Life is crazy hectic, right? But it's like, I feel like most of the time we don't spend the time to really evaluate these things. So we're going to do it today. And what we're going to be doing is looking at 3 different stories, okay? And trying to find the most important or quintessential takeaway from these stories, right? Like how are these all similar? What's the main takeaway? And I'm just hoping that we're not going to get too in depth into these stories, because each one of them, could certainly prompt a very long video on its own. So, excuse me, obviously we're just going to be skimming over them. But I'm just hoping that we can see these stories, these tales, like William Blake says, through the eyes and not with the eyes, right? So we're going to be looking a little bit deeper as we examine them. So the stories are, the first one's called The Judgment of Paris. It's related to mythology. And then we have the movie Snow White. We're going to take a look at that, as well as the story of Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden and their temptation. So, all right, let's go ahead and dive in with Paris and the 3 goddesses, right? Also called the Judgment of Paris. And just to sum it up, essentially, and you're gonna depending on your source, if you decide to research this yourself, which I always encourage if you have interest to do your own research. But I like to view my platform as just this place of inspiration for you all. But depending on where you go to do your research, you may find in all of these different stories and myths and movies and everything, when you're examining the meaning, the deeper meaning here, you're going to find different elements of the story itself in your search for the meaning. So, and also you're going to find how it's extremely common for something modern, a modern story like a movie, like a Disney movie, to have foundations in older folklore and fairy tales, right? So just expect there to be some differences. That's very common. I learned about the differences and how they typically don't change the the main takeaway or the big lesson of the story. I learned that in Clarissa Pinkola Estes' book, Women Who Run with the Wolves. And so so let's begin. So the Judgment of Paris. Basically, it starts with a wedding, okay? And like it's supposedly all the gods or demigods, whatever they're called, were all invited, except for one, okay? And her name was Eris. And I've seen it spelled differently. E-R-I-S is one way, right? And also A-R-E-S. But the goddess Eris was known as the goddess of discord, okay? Or also strife. Okay, or in today's terms, we like to call this drama, essentially, right? So they didn't want that going down at the wedding, okay? And so what happened was, I'm looking at what part do I read. Depending on your source, I have read that it was Zeus, and I have read that I have heard from Joseph Campbell that it was Hermes that requested Paris, right? He was a prince, I believe, to be the person to choose among these 3 goddesses. And let me go ahead and give you the backstory on what happened, okay? So the goddess Eris was not invited to this wedding, and she was very jealous, okay? She was mad about it. She was resentful about it. So she crafted this, or found this, I don't know if she made it or found it or what, but there was a golden apple, okay? And on it, she inscribed that it was intended for the fairest the fairest one. And so when she threw it into, the wedding area, the three goddesses that were there, they all wanted it. And they couldn't, decide who deserved it. So this started this disharmony, which is exactly what they didn't want among the wedding guests. And so this is where you have, depending on the version you read, it was either Zeus or Hermes, or they worked together some way to get Paris to make the decision, among these three goddesses who were invited to the wedding, which one was considered the fairest. The three goddesses, which Joseph Campbell said represent three destinies or fates. I feel like these stories are just layered with meaning, okay? I don't really feel like these are applicable to what we're going to be talking about with regards to them representing three destinies or three fates, but I wanted to mention it to you. And I'll actually drop a link in the description to one of Joseph Campbell's, a segment of one of his speeches, so that you can hear about this from his point of view, okay? But each of the goddesses wanted to be chosen, right? Wanted Paris to choose them as the fairest. So they all offered something to him. They all offered a lure or a bribe. So there was Athena, and what she offered to Paris, if he chose her, was guardianship and guidance in the heroic life. And if you think about that, the hero's journey, which that also came from Joseph Campbell, that certainly makes sense, especially when you're traversing the underworld, right, part of your journey, to have a guardian and then someone that helps guide you. That's incredibly important. So that's what Athena offered for him, according to Joseph Campbell. Then we had Hera, who offered him world rule and control. And then we had Aphrodite, who actually offered him another woman. Aphrodite offered him Helen of Troy, right? Now remember, I don't think that they were, and I haven't looked into this, deep enough, I don't think that they were competing for him to choose one of them, to be his wife or anything. They just wanted to know who was deserving of the apple that the goddess of discord threw into the wedding party, right? Eris. They wanted to know, okay, who wins this competition? And so he was to choose. So Aphrodite offered him Helen, and she became known as Helen of Troy, but she was already married. I believe Joseph Campbell said she was the wife of the king of Sparta, and she was considered the most beautiful woman in the world, okay? And so he chose Aphrodite as the winner of this contest. And so in order to obtain his prize, you might say, Helen, there was I think he had to break into, her home and kidnap her and all this stuff. And that essentially it started a big war. And this war became known as the Trojan War. So that's called the Judgment of Paris, if you want to look into that. Excuse me, which is interesting because that phrase itself, according to, I think it was Wikipedia, I found this, the Judgment of Paris is just a phrase that can be said to mean or stand as a metaphor for the ultimate origin of a war or other event. Okay, so this was the golden apple of discord, you might say. All right, and then this is interesting too. Wikipedia says, in common parlance, the apple of discord is the core. The apple of discord is the core, kernel or crux of an argument or a small matter that could lead to a bigger dispute. So that's really interesting, right? All right, called the golden apple or golden apple of discord. So if you think about it, what is at the foundation of this story? Is it vanity? Or is there something even layered beneath that? And what would that be? And so if we look deeper beyond vanity, just wanting to be the fairest and to be worthy of that golden apple. You know, what's beneath that? You know, I would propose jealousy, or you might say envy, okay? And what's really interesting here is Joseph Campbell elaborated that it was Hermes who caused Paris to make the judgment. And, you know, Hermes is regarded as the divine trickster, which we're going to be talking about the trickster in the Halloween series on my channel too, okay? So, what happened was Paris was coerced to judge, to be the judge here, okay? Which is the same thing that was manipulated or coerced in the Garden of Eden. Okay, there's a coercion from a trickster character to judge, okay, for oneself. Okay, and then also, of course, in the Garden of Eden story, there's a fruit, right? And I don't think it's actually specified, but it's just called the forbidden fruit. All right. So, just a quick search of, you know, the symbolism of apples in mythology. I want us to think about this, kind of have this, you know, tuck this away in the back of your mind as we're going further into the discussion today. So the symbolism of apples can mean love, beauty, and wisdom, okay? So if you think about it, some of the tales, like in Snow White, which we're going to get to that movie, and some of them, you know, it's a poisoned apple. So a poisoned apple could indicate corruption or exploitation of these qualities of love, of beauty, of wisdom, okay? And then if you think about what those goddesses represented, you know, that kind of all is starting to correlate now, see? Apples can also symbolize temptation, health, and immortality, among other things. Okay, so if we take a look at these qualities, right, that are symbols, right, or what apples symbolize in mythology, the way we can kind of zoom out and sum all of them up is that they are all sometimes considered like a form of perfection or idolization. So think about it, right? I'm going to mention them again real quick. Love, beauty, wisdom, temptation, health, immortality. It's like these lofty goals that are just so, we elevate them to such a degree that they're just I guess desired so much by the human heart, right? And so we have, in our own via our own human judgment, I feel like idolized these things, and you know, how have we decided they're that important, right? What are they important based on? Okay, we've decided, that's the key word here, that they're just super important based on our judgment, right? All right, so you know, the Bible says that all fall short of the glory of God, but yet, you know, humanity throughout time has always had this desire to be God-like, to obtain some form of perfection, and it's all a lie. It's a lie. Excuse me, I'm getting better, y'all. So what's really interesting too is I found out that Paris, he in the stories, the mythological stories, he was the one who killed Achilles. It was an arrow that he shot. And so it's really interesting. You got me looking at Achilles. But I want to describe these two characters first to you, right? I want to describe, just real brief. Paris was, again, a prince, and he was supposedly just very, you know, by, I guess, that society's standards, considered very handsome. And I think there was, like, I can't remember all the qualities. You can look them up, but I don't know that he was all that ethical. Okay, But then we have Achilles. And Achilles, you know, as the story goes, the only weak point that he had was his heel. And why is that? It's because his mother was holding him there, you know, at the back of his heel when she dipped him in this very famous mythological river, the river Styx, S-T-Y-X, right? Styx. And gotta love the river symbolism. It's like always there. I feel like, you know, mountains and caves and rivers and fruit and all these, you know, commonalities among different myths and fairy tales. But so, you know, the name Styx is related to shuddering, and I view it not so much as being cold, but like a, you know, like when you're just shake into your core kind of thing, you know, gives you chills. And then also the online etymology dictionary breaks down the meaning of Styx as the hateful or hatred. Okay, and we know that the Styx River is the river of the underworld. Okay, now what's really interesting is, you know, Achilles was described as very, very resilient, you know, almost indestructible, except for that one weak point. Okay, so we have to remember that. We're going to talk more about it. And then also, I found out that this river, a lot of the gods and goddesses would swear oaths by this river. Okay, and you know, the Bible says we're not supposed to do that. We're not supposed to swear oaths, which is really interesting. Okay, so Achilles was made invincible to harm after being dipped in the river. Okay, so that's his legacy. That's the story of his character. Almost everybody remembers that part of it. And then what's interesting to me is we tend to focus on his weak spot, you know, with the term Achilles heel, more than we do the fact that he was dipped in the river. And it's like the heel part of the story is what we remember the most. I feel like most of us, you hear that, you know, circulating the most among people, but we forget that, you know, the rest of him, he was resilient because of being dipped in this river. So there's something there. There's meaning there, and we're going to get to it. But I just want you to be kind of, you know, let it be marinating on it, you know what I mean, chewing on it. So let's go back real quick to Eris, right? In this story, the Judgment of Eris, she was the goddess of discord. She's also called the daughter of the night. The daughter of the night. So, you know, she's from the darkness. And in psychology, if you're looking at this through the archetypal lens, she might be the personification of the unconscious aspect. Okay, so that's important. We're going to tie all this together. And then what's really interesting here, this is going to be related to what we just said, talking about darkness and the unconscious part of humanity's psyche, whether it be individual or collective. So her children, she had a lot of children, and their names, I didn't write down their actual names, but they all translated into these qualities. So listen up. These are her children. Okay, these were the names associated with her children, or the meanings of the names: hardship, forgetfulness, starvation, war, murder, quarrels, lies, disputes, ruin, and oath. All right, and then it was said explicitly, where I was researching this, that oath is what most afflicts men on earth. Okay, and then there was a character in the mythological stories. Like I said, this is one of her children, and his actual name was, and I'm probably going to butcher the way I pronounce this, but it's Horkos, H-O-R-K-O-S. All right. It says, Horkos personifies the curse that will be inflicted on any person who swears a false oath. So I view this, when they talk about a curse, I view this as being a spiritual death. Okay? So this is all related to lies, strife, darkness, hell on earth, you might say. Okay? So this is all really, really important, especially as it relates to the unconscious, the aspects of humanity that we are not willing to acknowledge, that we don't want to see. If there's any of these aspects within ourselves, we don't want to see that within ourselves. And also, if there's aspects in other people, that maybe these are people in our lives that we love, that we think we know. A lot of times we are blind to these aspects in them because we don't want to acknowledge these things in them, or the potential, even though we might see red flags. You see what I'm saying? So it's important. We're all going to tie it together here in a little bit. But apples, which is our inspirational item today, if you think about it, they're very tempting on the outside, right? They look just great. I mean, they're juicy and plump, and they have great color and all this stuff, right? But at the core of an apple, its seeds are actually poisonous, right? It's related to, or depending on the amount or whatever, I think the poison is actually called cyanide. And so, yes, poisonous seeds at the core of the apple. Okay? So it's really interesting. All right. So, in all these stories that we're gonna go over briefly today, it's this essence of destruction. It's typically, you might even view it as self-sabotage if you're viewing all of these characters as different aspects of one's psyche. It could be considered self-sabotage, but regardless, it's there's certainly an essence of destruction present. Okay, and there's innocence and naivety involved, and there's trickery involved, deceit, and there's typically a death or many deaths. Okay, so a lot of times what happens is, with this trickery or the lure or the temptation, the person who falls victim to this lie, this deceit, this temptation, coercion, whatever, typically they're portrayed as being innocent, but are they really innocent? So let's take a look. So the wicked stepmother of Snow White, okay, which is the witch in the story, excuse me, she consulted her mirror to judge who was the fairest of them all. So she looked outside of herself. Go with me here. This is kind of the meat of the message today. She looked outside of herself and consulted her mirror to determine who is the fairest of all. So there was clearly this envy in her heart. Okay, so you have this jealousy, this envy, this hunger, this desire that's very corrupt, because she wants to be the fairest, and then she's also seeking out here this outside input to make the judgment on this call. Okay. And then we have Eris. Who the god of discord in the story I just presented with you all. And she threw the apple in, and then it was Zeus or Hermes, or a combination of the both working together, who consulted Paris. Again, they could have made the decision right there, right? In fact, you could take it further back and say the three goddesses that were, fighting over who gets the apple, they really could have made the decision themselves, right? Or either just chose to walk away and not even be a part of it. You know what I mean? If I was there, I certainly wouldn't care. And so I'm just thinking, but they were in this disharmony. They were in this argument. They were competing, and so Zeus and Hermes had to step in. But instead of handling it themselves, again, they looked outside of themselves for someone else to make the judgment call. Okay, So they consulted Paris for that. You know, who's the fairest of them all? There's a competition. So everyone consulted an outside source, just like our third story here, Adam and Eve. See, Adam and Eve had a direct line to what should have been their only source. Okay, their source for guidance. Okay, but they chose to look outside of themselves, which is, you know, within a person is where you have that inner guiding light, right? Spiritually speaking. But they decided to look to the serpent. And what's interesting is the serpent said that they would be able to judge. So it's kind of like they viewed it as, I guess, from their perspective or perception, they viewed it as needing to consult God for judgment. So they viewed it as needing to look outside of themselves. See, this is where you have to really kind of follow this and think about it. God's plan was for them to work together with Him in relationship, for it all to be a joint effort, right? That He was the head of the household. He was the one, you know, in the driver's seat, right? But they viewed it not like this. They viewed it as He was separate, see. He wasn't assimilated in their heart in that manner for that relationship, that bond to be there. He was viewed as, you know, separate and external. So they wanted that power to judge to be within themselves. Well, see, through the Christian lens, you know, Jesus said He had to go away in order for the Holy Spirit to come upon us, to reside within us, to be that internal guidance. Okay, so the guidance is within us. And we don't need to look outside for it. So you know, the spirit that is driving all of these characters in these stories, they're wanting to be the best. They're wanting to have the most, to be godlike. You know what I mean? My question is this: could envy be the greatest motivating factor of evil? In looking at the definition of envy, I found this: a feeling of discontented or resentful longing aroused by someone else's possessions, someone else's possessions, qualities, or luck. So again, here we have the root cause being envy, meaning longing, which means or indicates a mindset of what? Lack. A mindset of lack. Because again, if we place ourselves, you know, through our, you know, imaginative mindset or creative liberty, however you want to say it, if we place ourselves in these stories, I know I wouldn't care about being the one to get the apple to win the prize, you know. There's no need to win. See. So, but that was the issue. There's a mindset of lack. So, going back to the river of Styx, this is really interesting. You know, Achilles was dipped in there, almost totally over his whole body, and being dipped in the river of the underworld, which represents the unconscious, where all of these bad things reside, like tendencies for lies and disputes and quarrels and war and murder and ruin and all this stuff. That's where those tendencies reside, is in the human unconscious part of the psyche. Okay, if that's symbolized by the river Styx, and Achilles was dipped in that river, that made him resilient everywhere he was dipped into the river. Why? Why did that make him resilient? It made him resilient because I view it as he faced these aspects of his own unconsciousness head on. He wasn't fearful of them. He didn't run from it, see. Now, on that note, running from it, it's interesting because I found that most of the gods or demigods, I don't know the difference, I'm not an expert yet in mythology, but supposedly they all avoided this river, right? So in other words, they were also the ones caught up in all the drama, see, because they weren't willing to face the darkness within, the shortcomings within, the faults and the flaws, and accept them. You see what I'm saying? So big revelations when you are able and willing to be patient enough to decode the meaning of all the symbolism, I feel like. So yes, people who have sworn, here we get back into the oaths, right? Oaths. All those gods and demigods that totally avoided this river would swear by it, though. So it's like they knew, they had this respect, they were afraid of it, but yet they had this great respect for it enough that it was what they swore by, which is interesting. Okay? So, here's how I view it. People who have sworn by the river Styx, what I call the river of death, because if you fully embrace all of these aspects of the darkness and you live by them, you are spiritually dead. Okay? People who do that do not carry the life-sustaining manna inside. They are empty and forever hungry. In other words, they are bound to a mindset of lack for as long as they choose to run from their flaws. That's the whole turning point, is to acknowledge one's own flaws. You're not going to have peace in this life until you accept you're flawed. And I think sometimes, just being real with you and just straight talk, I think sometimes people run from it because, and look, this is no excuse to be a narcissist, okay? I'm not making any excuses whatsoever, but just in general, again, it's a spectrum. It's not like black and white type stuff. We can all have, flawed tendencies, okay? But, nobody likes rejection. Nobody likes that. It's just a normal human need, just on an instinctive level, really, to be accepted by your tribe, by your people. Even just, I say instinctive because it's, related to survival, but nobody wants to be rejected. And so, I think that maybe, we all at some point in our life, maybe before we've really matured a lot or whatever, it's hard to just accept aspects of yourself that you again, here's where the error is, see, that you have judged as flawed because maybe as a child these aspects of you were judged by someone else, by a narcissistic parent or sibling or friend that really wasn't a friend. You know what I mean? So it may have given a person a complex that they then carried forward, with this internal voice just judging themselves. I mean, that's just no way to live. It's certainly not a life of peace, but we have to get to the point where we have to say, you know what, even if I'm not accepted, by these people, I'm going to choose a life of peace over acceptance by, these other flawed humans. You see what I'm saying? Because we're all flawed. All of us, again, all fall short of the glory of God. So, the irony, the beautiful paradox here is, once we are willing to accept our flaws, and some people never will, and let me not go off on this tangent here, but once we're willing and able to do that, it's like it's like you can just relax. It's just a life of peace. And the beautiful paradox is that the people that are really meant to be in your life will come, because they too will see, oh, well, this person isn't judging themselves, so I can feel comfortable in their presence to not, try to, walk on pins and needles and be a certain way. I can just relax and be myself, my flawed, imperfect self, who's still honest, and has goodness in my heart, but I don't have to stress about it, about being flawed. You see what I'm saying? And then you have these other people who will never admit their own flaws, and when they all get together, it's kind of like they're digging their own grave, in the aspect that, they're having to cover up lies with more lies, and all these children that the daughter of the night had, the daughter of discord, all these things, just become more and more and more amplified. And so it's kind of like we're examining, how the darkness becomes the darkness, and even more so. It's kind of like, how does it keep going? And that's what it all comes down to. There has to be humility. There has to be an acknowledgement of not being godlike, enough to be qualified to be the judge. You see what I'm saying? And so it's really interesting. But yeah. So, Adam and Eve, I'm gonna leave you with this. This is really interesting to me. Adam and Eve, their punishment, their curse, punishment, whatever, however you want to say it, was banishment from paradise. I looked up the term paradise on the online etymology dictionary, one of my favorite resources, and it has peri, P-A-I-R-I, meaning around, and then diz, D-I-Z, meaning to make or form a wall. So a lot of times these parts of a word are flip-flopped, so let's just put this together. So paradise, broken down into parts, would mean to make or form a wall around. Why is this important? Because when you are self-contained, you're not lacking. You're not lacking. You're not leaking precious life force and energy to people who are never satisfied, and also you're not allowing the darkness to come in. But ultimately, you might say, you're not lacking. You're not living with a mindset of lack. You are self-contained and self-sustained, because you have assimilated, you might say, this numinous aspect inside of you and made it part of you, and in that manner you are reborn. And you're certainly not afraid to run from your flaws. So I hope this has been an interesting discussion for you all. I thank you for coming along to hear the message. I wanted to have all my Halloween episodes be, kind of like the whole, we call it atmosphere, but it's not called that. It's called, I'll drop it in there if I can think of what it's called. But it essentially means like this, atmosphere with intention. I wanted it to be, all kind of spooky and, have this autumn and Halloween look to it, and instead it's like I'm down here in the South and I'm, sweating to death and everything. So I'm in my summer tank top and all this stuff. But anyway, I've got my candy corns hanging up here for Halloween, and my little witch hand that I bought. Kind of cool, I thought. So anyway, I just hope y'all enjoyed the message, and I just thank you for coming along to listen. I hope that I got the wheels turning for you, and I hope that you are inspired to go and do more research on your own. So thanks again. I hope you have a beautiful day, and I'll see you again very soon.